So this video will be talking in much more detail about the findings and what you need to do in the findings section of your literature review. First of all, we'll just briefly talk about the relevance to clinical practice, and that's really a spot where you need to think about what's the relevance of why other registered nurses would want to know or need to know about your area of review. Now, if we have a quick squiz in some published ones, we'll be able to have a look at what they say. Now, a lot of journals these days have this box that's relevant to clinical practice, and it also has one at the beginning, which is what does this add, basically. So if you have a look at this box and then the relevance to clinical practice, which you'll find closer to the conclusion, they're quite useful little spots for you to pick up and have a think about. And this gives you that, well, why is it useful? Why is it useful to undertake research or review of this description? And how does it help registered nurses, or how does it help particular patients? So we've got a couple of different literature reviews from the Journal of Clinical Nursing here to have a look at. And again, there's some, there's that box there as well. And we've got, now, what they've done here is they've got a couple of things in this paper. They've got relevance to practice, and what they've done here is this is about post-traumatic stress disorder in critical care environments. And so they've actually, from their review, identified causative and potential risk factors, and they're listed here. Now, you're not doing an extensive enough review to be able to get to this sort of point, but you will be able to, get to the point where you can make some recommendations. I mean, this article has been able to go on and basically say this is a rudimentary screening tool, and the people undertaking this article would, given that they've found these 8 particular risk factors and causative factors, possibly they've gone on to do some research looking at whether they could develop a screening tool on that. Okay, now in this one, this is about undergraduate nursing students' attitudes and use of research and evidence-based practice. So if we pop down and have a look at the relevance to clinical practice, let's have a look. What has this person said? Okay, so they haven't done it in the traditional sense, but we have got this section up here that says, what does this contribute? Okay, and so effectively, what does this contribute to the wider global clinical community is pretty similar to relevance to clinical practice. And you can see here, they've got it here in the abstract. Okay, so it really is about drawing those links back to the clinical area in whatever you do. But now what we want to do is make sure that you understand how you're going to write the findings section. So we're going to just whiz down to the results. So remember in the last video we talked about there was a diagram that these people had. Sorry, there. So you can do it in as a table. So this is how they've done it, and we've asked you for a table, but we haven't. We've asked you your table's a lot more simplistic because we understand your where you are in your research journey is not the same. So your capacity to read and understand statistics might not be that detailed. But if you have a look here, this is a good way where they've got findings here, and when I mocked up this particular example in an online meeting, I just added that findings column to demonstrate that it was a good way to if you just want to add it in there for your working out, like I'm sure many of you remember maths classes where the teacher always said show your working out. Well, that column there is your working out. Now if you want to leave it there as part of your submission, you're very welcome to, but you don't have to. Okay, but you can see here that in this particular article, this is the Ryan article on attitudes of undergraduate attitudes of and use of research. They've got the findings here, and that, if you start to look down here, gives you an idea about where are the similarities and where are the differences. So automatically I can see positive attitude here and positive attitude here, and I can see theory practice gap and theory practice gap. Okay, so we could already put them down as, we could put them down in a little spot and say, well, maybe they're two of the themes that become bigger across the papers. Now what are these papers? They've only got 9 papers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 9 papers that she's reviewed here. So even though you're reviewing 5, this is only 9. So you can have a look at this and really think about it. So if you were doing this review, you'd read all these papers in a lot of detail, just like you've read yours, and you'd use their findings, but you might come to realize that some of how they write it might, when you think about it, you think, oh, maybe that, that would fit into the theme of theory practice gap. So, oopsie, sorry. So when we look here and we can see discrepancy between positive attitude and value of research, I'd be having a look at that and seeing, well, what do they mean there? Similarly, this particular finding that they've got here that says support for research use is much greater on campus than in the clinical setting. Well, that to me is the theory practice gap as well. So while it's talking specifically about support, I think there's we do see that theory practice gap in both uptake of research in the clinical domain as well as value. And so if you wanted to define, if you were doing this, you might then define the theory practice gap as being, you might include in your different definition of the theme what that means, and it might also be support. Okay, so if you want to look at some of these other areas and just start to think about, well, what are they, and then you can start discussing them together, and that's where you start. Now they've done it as intrinsic and extrinsic factors, and you can see that they've done a definition here. All right, so included such components as student attitude or intention, where most occasions the data showed positive attitude. Okay, so they're telling you what they mean there. So their discussion in the articles that we've got here, and you'll see it's probably called discussion here. So but effectively it sits in that same section of findings as what you've been asked to do, and this is this person's tables. It's on the side, so it's tricky to read. So their findings and discussions is what you're being asked to do in this findings section. Okay, but they're discussing it in greater detail, and it would be worth you going to have a look in this. So here, all I've done, and I demonstrated this in the last screencast, is I went into CINAHL, I put in Journal of Clinical Nursing with publication name here and used literature reviews over there. Okay, I'd have a look at that. You could do the Journal of Advanced Nursing, but they're slightly different to these. Okay, and what you'll see is how they discuss discuss each of the studies. Okay, now so see here, there's this drawing together with the 5 out of 6 of these studies demonstrate a significant improvement in medication adherence, while the sixth study trended towards significant. Okay, so what the authors are doing in this study is are drawing together the themes out of the other studies, and they might be giving it, sometimes you might give it a new umbrella term that fits your review a bit better, so you might call it something else that's not being, say you might call it say here positive attitude and theory practice gap, but you might change the name and so that you define it so you can fit in findings like this into your particular your theme. Alrighty, so you're going to be discussing their themes in the context of how you group them together. Now you have to sort of comment on why you've grouped things together. And remember, your marker will be reading the papers that you review. Okay, so that's important to remember, that you want to be making sure you are doing the best job you can at that, in the veracity of your work. Now, what we would want you to do is a general discussion where you are discussing them. So you're talking about where they were similar, where they were different. Now you might happen to say, and I think somewhere here, it might be this one. Who's talking about, no, it's this second one. Talking about limitations of the reviewed research, reviewed literature. Now, you can do this sort of thing in that results section. Okay, and what you might find is this is where you might talk about how they've got, like here they're talking about 16 of the included studies had a significant attrition rates because a lot of people died, basically. Okay, so other times you might be talking about how there was not a huge amount of research in the area in the year period. You might be talking about other stuff around that there was not similar studies from a similar methodological background. Okay, so that's the sort of things you need to do for your findings section. All right, now it's a thematic analysis and you can go and look at that up, and that's typically where you're drawing the themes out of the original research and discussing them in detail. You are analysing them and going over them and trying to think about why they've got those findings. And this is where those skills that you've developed in your critique that you've already undertaken come to the fore, where you're looking at it more deeply and going, well, why is that so? Okay. After your findings, you've got your relevance to clinical practice. We've spoken about that. And then you've got your conclusion and your reference list in APA format. Okay, I hope this has been helpful, and we'll see you next time. Bye.